What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode podcast interview, where every single week we interview top real estate agents, top entrepreneurs, and strip top badasses out there dominating their space. So people choosing to not live a life of mediocrity, but instead to go out there and create big, amazing, epic lives for themselves and their families, as well as give back and have a big impact on others. And that's why they agree to take busy time out of their lives and their businesses to be here on the show. So today, you guys, we got a special guest on the show. Actually, a repeat guest. We had, this is a dude that we had on several years ago on the show, and a good buddy of mine. And what I've seen this dude do, in 3 years, he's created what took me 8 years to create. And this guy is just so ungodly impressive. So really excited to have him on the show. But in 3 years, again, you guys went from being a new agent, just like we are when we're starting out, building up a business, to in 3 years' time, developing an amazing, extremely successful team, being able to step out of production and do $1 million plus in yearly GCI. So really stoked to pick this dude's brains, where we can all learn from. My good friend, Matt Cavanaugh. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, dude, it's exciting, man. We had you on a few years ago. You made a trip out here to Phoenix from California to come on the podcast and just kind of, we just kind of hung out and did some shadowing. And dude, what you built was insane. Yeah, first off, dude, your podcast still to this day is the #1 most downloaded podcast we've ever had, which is awesome.
Yeah, I don't know how that's possible, but that's awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy because even more than like a Grant Cardone or, right? But here's the thing with it is I think one of the reasons that it's been such a downloaded podcast is because people can relate, agents can relate to what you're building and to your story. And, at that time you were a new agent, but you put $70,000 worth of commissions under contract. And like your first 90 days of being a full-time individual agent, we went in depth with about how you did that. And we'll have a link below for those of you that haven't seen that podcast, so you guys can check that out, which kind of goes through your story of how you got into the business, why you got into the business. And so I don't want to, got a limited amount of time with you. So I want to make sure I'm using this to pick your brain on the right things, because everybody can watch that and it'll be below where you guys can see that, but since then, man, I mean, you went from, kicking ass out of the gate as an individual agent. And the cool thing that I love about it is it wasn't like you just got lucky. I mean, you were very methodical. You went out there, did your research before you got into this. Like most people get out of real estate school. Yeah, right. And then they try to figure out the plan. Like you had a plan from day one of what you were going to execute on, how you're going to execute this stuff. But since then, man, and like I said in the intro, in 3 years, dude, you took me 8 years to do, which was build a successful real estate team and be able to step out of day-to-day production. And you've done that in 3 years, man. So let's just pick up from that, man. So last time we talked, individual agent, that's crushing it. Let's kind of talk about at what point were you at where you started your team, and what was kind of that deciding push factor to start your team?
Okay, cool. Yeah. So basically I want to, give the users a little bit of information too. I feel like my training for being a real estate agent started in my previous job selling, commercial contracts. So there's no way in the world I would have been able to come into the real estate world and do what I did without that selling experience. So that job, I had a base salary, so I didn't have to worry about making money. And my full-time job was just to go get clients. So knocking on doors, making phone calls, selling to kind of, big wigs. It was all that practice. I mean, the presentations to them were just like a listing presentation would be to a client. And so I feel super blessed in the sense that I had 3 years of sales experience when I hit the real estate industry. So I had to tailor the experience a little bit into, working with a buyer and seller, but fortunately I had no fear of the phones. I had no fear of open houses and door knocks, and with a few tweaks was able to get rolling right in. The other thing too, like I met you like right away in my career, which like was the biggest blessing like ever. I remember like being with you the day we shot that first video, and like you just rolled everything out to me. And this was, I think, before internet education in real estate was as big as it is now. And I came into the mindset that I'm in real estate, I can make $200,000 to $300,000, and that would be like arriving. Because having made like $30,000 to $40,000 as a teacher, it was like 300. It's like, that's 9 years worth of working, in 1 year. And you were like, no, Matt, that's not what you're in this for. Like, this is the bigger picture, and the thing that never left me was you said, I can't remember the exact year it was, but it was like year 8 to 12 is when you started to build your team. And you said, if I had to do it over again, I would have started right away. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to take this nugget and I'm going to, like, from day one, I'm going to hire somebody, which I don't know if that's advisable, but I've always had the team mindset, and I attribute so much of that to your advice. And, there's been a lot of joy in that, and there's been a lot of difficulty starting a team so early on, and which I'd love to share, so everybody can kind of know, that process. But yeah, man, it's been a super fun ride. So.
Yeah, no, and just to kind of pick your brain on this I think that so many real estate agents that jump into this business, they think that they have to start all over without kind of dissecting and looking back into the skill sets that they learned from previous careers or previous things in their life, where whether even like when they're in high school, junior high, like the college or whatever it may be, and connecting the dots of elements where they've shined at and how they can, plug those into and how they can adapt those. It's like for me for open houses, when I was trying to figure out my lead gen source, I was in the health club business. And I'm like, an open house is the same way. People come in, they do a guest registry, I can tour them here. So it gave me that confidence, and I was able to develop a plan out of something that, I've done my whole life before I got into real estate. Yeah, right. And I see so many people that, again, whatever the professions, whether it's teaching or being a police officer or, whatever that was, where, man, there's so many dots that they could connect. And you had a sales background, but whether it's a sales background or not, man, there's so much power in that. And now that you are having a lot of agents, because you have agents joining your team all the time, not kick ass out of the gate, that didn't have the sales background that you have, but how important do you think that is of agents, instead of trying to figure out a way to reinvent yourself? It's like, identify what your strengths are from your previous wins in life before you got into real estate, and plug those, see how you can plug those into your real estate business.
It's huge. It's everything. And I would say, I think obviously I was successful in sales because of my work ethic, but the biggest reason I think I was successful in sales in the commercial industry, selling uniform services and contracts, was because I was a teacher before that. And as a teacher, you really have to get to know your kids and motivate your kids, which comes from listening and asking good questions. And then, which takes you back to the fundamentals of sales, which is, how do you ask great questions? How do you get to know somebody so that you can influence them? And so most of us, if we look deep, like you're saying, we see some things in our life that taught us how to interact with people. That can translate then into other aspects which feed into sales. So I think developing a really relational approach to sales has been helpful. The other thing I think is just learning how to tell your story. When you start to identify what you're good at and why you're good at it, and it's unique, then you create a selling proposition that nobody else can talk about or they're beat. Me being a math major going into teaching, like, I solve problems. Like, that's the connection, right? And so when I pitch that to a client, well, nobody else is a math major that solves people's problems. So like, they can connect to the story. So I think that's a big thing, is when you connect to yourself and your past, then it makes it easier to tell your story. And then I think people want to do business with you in a much, higher way. So.
Yep, love it, dude. All right, man. So let's just jump into, it's the starting of your team, as you talked about. So after we met right out of the gate, you're hiring your first assistant, and well, I don't even know if it was, what was that first hire, and kind of walk us through, the goods, the bads, the ugly, dude.
Yeah. So I did, I think what a lot of people do when they don't think things through as much as maybe they could. I hired my sister-in-law, which was not a bad hire. It was a great hire. She was with us for 4 years, and she's still with us in a tiny little agent capacity. But it was just, hey, I have a need. I don't have much money, so how can I do this cheap? And if I had to do it over again, I would have waited. I would have waited until I had, probably a full year's salary for that person. And if I could do it over again, I would have hired at the highest level, not at an entry level. I think I hear this conversation swirling around the groups a lot of, okay, how can I get somebody and kind of grow them into everything? I would hire somebody could be dominant at everything almost out the gate. I would probably hire someone that I would pay 70 to 100,000 to, than versus somebody that I would pay, $3,000 a month to. Just because that very first hire, they're going to run that side of your business or they're not. And so maybe you can hire somebody early in the game that could develop to that person, but I think that's harder to do than people think. So I had tasks done for me, which was nice from an early stage, which allowed me to grow. But I think if I had to start over, I'd wait a little bit longer, find the rock star, pay him a good amount of money, and build it from there.
Yeah, because well, and more so now, when I first started my team back in over 12 years ago, right? Because I was in the business for a year, and I just got to the point where I was at a max capacity. I had to get some help, and back then you didn't see a lot of the services that exist out there today. Now, there's ways to bridge it, right? I mean, you have services that you can go pay somebody $300 a file to do your TC stuff, or $100 for listing input. So that doesn't mean that you'd have to wait to help with some of those taskings. You could have outsourced without taking the risk on to have a full-time, employee, right, and then waited for that big person. So if you could do it all over again, is that what you would have leveraged some of these outsourced activities? Because then 100%. If you're not leveraging those, it gets really hard to get yourself to the $400,000 a year, where you're at a position where you can pay that $75,000, $80,000, $100,000 salary to, right?
Yeah, I would do outsourced TC listing inputs from day one. 100. Well, maybe you do one if you want the experience, but one would be the most. And if you're going to do the first one, you don't even know what you're doing, so you might as well outsource that one. So I think from the very beginning, outsource that stuff, and just have the person shoot a screenshot video while they're doing it, so you can see how it's done and put it in your training file, and then move on. But yeah, I would outsource. And then maybe when you're hitting a place, like I said, where you got maybe 6 months to a year of that person's salary saved up, then you got all the videos in place. You can roll with it. If not, just hire the person you've been outsourcing to if they're a badass.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you said there too with the reserves and the planning, is so critical, because I see so many that are busy that want to hire an assistant. But it's like, look, I mean, when you hire somebody that's new at the gate, it's going to take at least 90 days to really get them fully trained. So you're actually going to retract in your business, because you're going to be doing less because you got to take the time to train them. Then let's just say day 91, they're rock and rolling on your own. Well, now you got to restart over with those tasks, and you're able to do more of them. But we're in a business where it takes 4 to 6 months to get paid on what you're doing. Right? So yeah, it is. I mean, if you break it down realistically, it is like, hey, before you get this ROI on this person, it can take a solid 9 months.
And so we're starting to bring on agents onto our team. We've taken way too long to start like recruiting process, but now we're recruiting, we're having conversations with agents, on almost a weekly basis, if not more. And I can't tell you the number of times, at least probably 15 or 20. Hey, Matt, I lost $100,000 in 2 years of my life trying to build a team, and it didn't work. I was at the Mastery Alumni talking to a handful of agents. Hey, I spent a couple $100,000 and I had to cut all of my heads off, and go back down to solo agent. It's really like depressing how much money and time and energy people place into building teams, and it doesn't go. Yeah, I mean, it is by far so much more complicated, in my opinion, to build a team than become a successful agent. And it's just the skill sets, the risk, the intelligence, strategy required. It's certainly doable, but it's definitely I think a step up from just trying to learn how to sell a house or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, because your success of being a great team leader has nothing to do with your success of being a great real estate agent. And it's I used to always say that my biggest, like, if I could go back and give myself one piece of advice, it would be to start tracking out of the gate, because I didn't really start tracking to the level I should have been tracking probably for my first almost 5 straight years. Because even when I first started tracking, it was shit tracking, right? But then now, I'm like, okay, hey, I mean, tracking is up there for sure with that piece of advice. But the bigger piece of advice would have been to take the time to really learn how to hire people. Right? Like, I don't feel like, I feel like I'm we're always evolving and learning. I'm still evolving and learning that, but dude, it probably took me 11 or 12 years to really get that process down. And it's something I see too many people, man, rush into hiring. They don't know how to hire. They're not taking the time to really learn things like, the DISC test and multi-step interview processes, and filling out their internal processes and systems to, inspect what they expect and train this person right. And, that's been my biggest Achilles heel. Like, if I would have mastered that way early on in the process, dude, I'd be light years ahead of where I am.
Yeah. And that helps you in every business. Like, how do I identify talent? Does the talent fit the specific tasks? Do their personalities fit the tasks? I mean, learning how to build quality people, how to get them in, and then how to build them up it's a skill set that, applies in every business.
Yeah. Yeah. And then can you kind of talk about, maybe you experienced this, maybe you didn't. But like, I know for me, like when I stepped out of production, I mean, even to this day, I still have not matched the same amount of income that I was making while running a team and being in production as I have with being out of production. Now, the benefit of that is it frees up your time. And at some point, right, there'll be that critical mass where that threshold comes over, but I mean, I tell people like last year, I maybe worked 50 hours total on my team, and it's allowed me to create other revenue sources, right? But I still haven't matched, what I did with that. And I don't think people are really prepared for that. When you do start your team, dude, there's a step back on an income level. You might have gross volume that's higher, but dude, like you're going to take a hit. Yeah, right. And you got to be prepared for that. And it can take 3, 4, 5 years, right, before you rebuild it back to where it was, as you're in that growth mode. Can you maybe elaborate on what people that want to go out there and start a team should be prepared for when it comes to that element?
So just to be clear, like I'm not technically out of production, but my interaction with clients is so different than when I first started. So I don't do contract to close. I don't do TC. I don't do showings. So like when you look at, I have a conversation with a client and get them to work with me, and that's about it. Sometimes I'll run a negotiation occasionally. So I would say that's a process that's probably not being talked about as well as, I mean, your team, I would say my team could probably go to close to 1,000 transactions, at least 500 or 600 before I would feel like I have to step out of having 40 to 50 conversations a year. I mean, literally, like we're getting better in our sphere marketing with creating videos and shooting them out and running that 48 to 60 touch per year calendar. And as we do, we're getting more people coming to me saying, hey, Matt, I want you to sell my house. Sure, I'll sit down and have a 15 minute to half hour conversation with you to sign the listing, because that is such a dollar producing thing for me.
Yep.
So yeah, so in that sense, I'm in production, but like I'm not going to go out and put the sign in the yard or do anything beyond that. Schedule the photography, that's all going to be handled by our team.
Yep. Now, are you doing outside of those conversations? I mean, because you've got ISAs in place, and so you're not having to personally do any of the lead gen or lead follow up at this point.
Correct.
You've got the team and the funnel set up where you're just having those very high level conversations, closing that portion of the deal, and then it's on to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. So on the like million, like I have $1.5 million listing right now that I'll do a Tuesday 5-minute call with them. So my assistant will create, here's all the Facebook impressions, views, MLS views, and they'll put the sheet in front of me. I'll call them for 5 minutes and say, hey, this is what happened to your house in the last week. So I'll do that with them. But my assistants handle that for our, under $1 million listings, we'll say. Yeah. So like the big clients that really want my attention, I'll still give them some attention for sure.
And it's such a smart way to operate it, right? I mean, I did that somewhat to an extent of when I was because at the point where I could only involve my time on the listing side, at least, that's what I did at the time. And, I had somebody that would intake and do all the calls, because all of our calls, all our leads there were inbound. So I'd prep the listing file for me, right? So all I would have to do is show up to the doorstep, do listing presentation, get it inked, where I could go on, do 4 to 6 listing presentations a day. But then very quickly out of that, I stepped out of production altogether. But when you look at what you're doing, because what I can compare that to, at least from my experience, where I mean, as far as the most profitable years I had and the best margins was when we were deep into REO. Because with REO, it didn't take a lot of agents. So the company dollar coming in was, that was me, right? Yeah. But we just had an assembly line of staff. You had a full-time staff for utilities, had a full-time staff for, listing input or BPOs or whatever. So it was higher on the staff side, which still was a hell of a lot cheaper than paying a percentage per deal. Yep. But then you create these, this assembly line, if you will, where people got so damn good at just the one thing they did all day long. And dude, even when like our average commission was only $2,000 because prices were so, the market was so depressed at that time, and commissions that the banks would pay were a little bit less, but the margins were still insane. Chopping up that model, which is kind of what you replicated, but just with a traditional business.
Yeah. So, and then kind of going back to your point too of people's incomes, like my income virtually has not changed in the 3 years. This year is actually the lowest of all the years, because this is the year we took and got a big office and brought on a few things. So, but besides that, my income has been about the same each year, but our gross commission has doubled pretty much each year. So, but obviously there's a point where that changes. our TC could probably handle 2 to 2.5 times the number of files that he's handling now. Our full-time marketing guy could handle 4 times the volume that he's handling now. So we have him doing other projects like setting up a recruiting process. So we're kind of at that model where you have to have a certain number of services ready for your team to provide a good value to the team members. But our transaction count over the next 3 years will probably quadruple. And then when it does that, then, we won't have that many more expenses to handle.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, love it, dude. So then you kind of give us an idea, like a snapshot of what your team looks like, because I know that you do have agents on your team as well, that are going on some of their own appointments, whatever. So can you kind of give us just kind of a breakdown of what the team looks like?
Yeah, so we have a couple ISAs, about half a dozen agents, some of them which are newer. Kind of going along with the hiring conversation, we brought on agents, some of which we got successful, some of which we didn't. And in that, even some of the ones we got successful wanted to leave, shortly after, or it wasn't a fit, so we've kind of gone through that whole thing of really identifying our key person that we know we can get successful, really successful, but yet that's going to really love what we have going on and really feel its value, because, we are running a higher margin operation. Like one of our agents is going to make pretty close to 200 grand this year. And the splits to them are incredibly small compared to where they would get somewhere else, but we're feeding them a lot of deals that they could just go out and close. So we're running right now the higher margin, more specialized versions. And, so we've had to be really precise in who we pick up. But like moving forward, I think we're going to greatly expand our agent count. And then we're really considering like a split model where you've got the team, but then you've got, maybe like a brokerage component or another component where you can have the people that don't need all of that the team provides, and they could be on one split. And then you got the people that need and want what the team provides, and they're on another set of splits, so that you can really pick up the whole field. And that's where we would want to grow from, 6 agents, 10 staff we have now to, 100 agents. So.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love it. And it was something that we evolved to after years, because it gets to a point, man, where, on the conversation that you talked about, agents that join that are leaving you, and you got some that are going to be lifers for sure. But, we got to the point where it just seemed like every 24 months, man, it was just, give you this 24 months and they're like, hey, look, man, I'm just not willing to pay a 50-50 split or whatever it is, right? Where, that progressive split plan, is just kind of an evolution of it. And it can become, it's a win-win, right? So, where like we went to, cause I couldn't figure out what my agents wanted. So I was like, all right, let's just all get in a room and you guys just tell me what the hell you want. And I'll see if I can pull it off, right?
Yeah.
And you get to the point of like, hey, look, we don't need the leads. Like we built up our referral basis. We whatever, like teach us how to lead generate, and we'll go out there and fish for ourselves, generate our leads, but then provide everything else to the team, which allowed for that progressive split plan, which then, you can scale and have multiple models. And I think it's definitely a huge value for everybody, huge win for everybody down the road. Right.
That's great.
So then, all right, dude. So, one of these things where we talked about this at the in-person alumni, that was, like a few weeks ago. Right. I swear, I'm like, man, I just got to have Matt come on stage and do 50% of this alumni.
I would love to, man. It'd be awesome.
Because you got so much great insight of different things that you do, and a different perspective than I think, a lot of us just from, your love for numbers and where a lot of agents are, these hard driving, like, they love sales, they love right? But the numbers thing is their weakness, and it's so forced, right? With all of that, like the conversation we had at the last alumni, some of this was a lot of people are struggling with ISAs, right? And some of that model and how to work it right. And your compensation structure that you've done with it, I think is so brilliant, because it is difficult for either the traditional way that most teams are out there running this is it's either very difficult for the team leader to be at a negative net loss for the year it takes for things to start getting really good, or vice versa. It's very difficult for the ISA to stay in the game as long as they need for it to come through. And you kind of got some good workarounds with that. And with the ISA, model becoming more and more popular, can you maybe just share some things that you guys have done that have allowed it to be so successful, as well as maybe some tips that you would have to avoid, right? For other agents that are building that out?
I think the biggest thing, again, it comes back to hiring. I think a bad hire will never overcome any sort of model, doesn't matter how good. And a good hire almost can overcome any model. Not necessarily, but so I think the focus should always be in who you're hiring than the model. But obviously the model can be important too. So the biggest thing that I look for when I'm looking for an ISA is the S quality in their disc profile. If they don't have the S, they're not going to be stable. They're not going to be routine enough to come in and make calls day in, day out, the 6 to 8 hours a day that you need them to. The other aspects is you need the drive to be at a certain level to produce. So I have a very kind of specific, maybe 2 or 3 possible profiles that I look for when I'm looking for an ISA, and they're very tight in what I'll do. So if they're outside of that, then it's just not a consideration. So I think that's really important. Obviously, besides the disc, looking at their character, their past experience, all those things. There's plenty of people out there that have past phone experience that fit within a certain model that you can bring on. Oftentimes you always hear bring on the DI or the ID to go into sales, and there's better results right away typically, but it's just, you just don't get the longevity. So we brought in some S's, like my brother's an example, and we brought in another S too that they're doing well. And like my brother, like he's been at it for almost 2.5 years. He's had every opportunity to go be an agent, to leave, all those things, get better splits. He's been offered by probably 20 companies to go make more money calling for them. And there's no thought of it because he loves the routine and the stability. He's at S, like 99S. So for him, the idea of doing anything other than what he's doing is foreign.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. The other aspect, if we're talking about like structure, a lot of people are like the $200 to $2,500 a month plus either 5% of closings or $50 or whatever the case is. I just like paying per appointments met. Hey, come in, set a meetable appointment every single day, make, whatever you can offer them, 200 to 400, maybe even 500 per met. Hey, you're going to make $4 to $8 grand a month just setting mets every single day. And then, there's some qualifications around the Mets, like, if it's a buyer, hey, they've got to have at least a 620 FICO score. They've got to have basic parameters met. But other than that, just set some meets. We have plenty of agents that can handle closing them out.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So there are some specifications to make sure that they're qualified conductions. It's not just, like your agents aren't showing up to do it and then all of a sudden find out that, they thought we were just getting a free CMA. Like it's somebody that actually is looking at listing their home, or like you said, the buy side that's more qualified. So I love that. And then, if you're doing your job, as a team leader, and you've got, the right level of buyer consultation training, listing consultation training, because once the conduction is set, right, then with your conduction follow process to make sure that they're conducted, all through the funnel, like those numbers are pretty much going to be set numbers. Yep. So it makes it difficult if you're tracking and you have those processes in place where it's like from there on, the math kind of shakes out to be the math, right?
Yep. Yeah, no doubt. What I grossly underestimated too is how much training you need to provide to the ISAs to get them to be, to be at that right level. I provided insane amounts of training to my brother. And then in this new wave of hires we've made, I've trained half an hour a day, every single day, month in, month out, and then 1 to 1.5 hour trainings on Thursday and Friday. And it's insane how much better they are now than 2 months ago. I mean, insane. Like it's just awesome. So I don't think we'll ever give that up. We might even increase the quantity of training, but we go deep into like how do you handle this objection if you're talking to a D versus an I versus an S versus a C versus this versus that, context of the call. So when you do it every single day, you can get so deep, so fast. And on the cool thing that we have going on too, most days we have at least 4 people on these calls. And most days, those 4 people represent the DISC scale. So they get to see like, okay, how would what you have said be taken by this person versus that person? One person loves it, one person hates it. How do you quickly identify that inside of the call? So there's just the depth of what we get to and how that impacts. So like Nate as an example, he's one of our guys and he's lower on the I, but Chris is really high on I. So for example, like he'll just steal Chris's lines and start using them, and we'll catch that in the role play. And Chris will be like, "You just stole my line, brother." But it's perfect, because he's starting to recognize. And so the other aspect is when you role play with some similar people every day is you see what their weaknesses are. And then you just start staying in their weakness. And it could be agitating for them, but it's like, we're going to fixate on this until you're over it.
Yeah.
And so it's been phenomenal.
Yeah, no, I love that, dude. And one thing that you said at the alumni event as well is this, that daily training isn't just for your ISAs. Yeah, right. Because I mean, most realtors, I shouldn't say most, but a huge chunk of realtors that are active right now have never experienced even a normal market. Yeah, right. Like what we just got through over the last 6-8 years is not normal. And it's what, I mean, 80% of real estate agents' careers, they won't experience what we just experienced with these hardcore low inventory, second, longest bull market in recorded history that we experienced. And you talked about, hey, with the shifting market, because your market is one that shifted really fast, of the importance of just that daily training and sharpening your skill sets from an agent standpoint of, your presentations, scripts, on a daily basis. Can you kind of elaborate on that for, even if somebody's an individual agent that's listening to this, or a team leader, broker owner, but the type of daily mastering our skill set training? It's like, look, Tom Brady is still showing up every single day for practice. He's not just stepping on the field. So none of us are immune to it. Right. But talk to us about the importance of it, kind of what you guys are doing there, but also the impact that you've seen, company wide from just getting extreme with this training.
Okay. So one of the things, I was listening to a YouTube video, Grant Cardone's, and he invited one of his salespeople up to the stage, and they were asking him how often they role play. And the guy said at least daily, because for sure by the next day I'm rusty, but if sometimes I'm rusty the same day as I role played. And like that totally blew my mind, from like, oh my gosh, like I role play with these guys maybe once a week, maybe once a month. Like, what am I doing? Like, what kind of team leader am I if I'm only giving to them that often, and they're really going to get rusty even later that day? So that's when I was like, okay, we're going to change this. We're going to role play every day. And so I think there's knowledge that has to be instilled. Like an agent has to get to a certain like nuclear mass of like, how does a presentation go? What are the objections? How do I overcome them? That's step one, which could take anywhere from a month to maybe 3 to 6 months, depending on where the agent's background is. Then there's the practice. Like you just don't recognize the finer nuances of body language and how to adjust to those when you're not in practice. And so I think that becomes the big thing, is the importance of it is just to see the things that are minute. And I think that's why Brady's so successful is, when you're on the football field, you have to read coverages. I mean, there's like five, I don't know how many things, but I'm assuming at least 500 things he's got to keep tabs on to make the play that he's going to make. Where's the receiver? Where do I need to throw the ball? How fast are they running? What guys are collapsing? How many do I need to be up in the pocket, back in the pocket? All this are happening at the same exact time. Same thing in a listing presentation. You're there, you're thinking about, what am I going to say? What have I said? What are they thinking, right? What are their objections they're going to have? They cross their arms, they take a step back. Like, what does that mean? Like, if that's not intuitive, you're going to miss. Either you're going to get nervous and start stumbling, or you're going to miss the fact that, okay, they've started to separate themselves from the conversation. How do I re-engage them immediately? Like, so all those things, it's just, there's so much to be really tremendous, at the game. So.
Yeah, no, I love it, dude. So yeah, and then that's the cool thing about it is we're in an industry. I mean, if an agent chooses to, you don't have to wait a decade to become amazing. Yeah, right. I mean, with the amount of role playing that you are doing and your agents are doing, probably within 6 months, they have more at bats than somebody probably gets in a 20-year career. Yep. Yeah, right. Just imagine the power on that.
Yeah.
So then you talked about the disc, quite a bit. Can you talk about the importance of whether it's a disc or if they want to use another assessment, but the power of really truly getting to know that, and not just from you got it from the hiring standpoint, right? As well as a communication and leadership standpoint inside your organization. But as you just talked about, getting to be able to read, people, potential clients, because it's just something that I don't think I've ever really been to a good disc training course in the real estate industry. Everybody's talking about lead gen, lead fault, and all this other stuff, but like it's just something that is not pushed on us to really go out there and master.
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's pushed enough at all. And so we have WiseHire and Breezy, which are two like hiring platforms. And so we're getting about 100 applications a month. So I'm reviewing personally 100 disc profiles a month, give or take. And like what I know now compared to what I knew a year ago is tremendously different. Like to the point where when someone's getting ready to walk through the door for a shadow, even if I've never talked to them, I can tell the admin, this is what they're going to be like. And so I think that just becomes, I mean, and it's like, it doesn't just come down to even like making the right hire. It's like, it's becoming good with people. Like, what is this person going to be? The other assessment that I love, like love is the Enneagram, ENNEAGRAM. It breaks your personality profile into 9 profiles, and there are motivations. So DISC is more like general temperament, like driven versus detail oriented. Enneagram is like, what is your underlying life motivation? And it's like the complement of those two has been insane. Like I was sitting with a client we closed, it was like a little over $1 million home, sitting with him, and the way he was talking like about how his kids weren't helping him in the move, like I'm like, you're a 2 on this Enneagram. And he's like, well, I don't know what the Enneagram is. So I'm like, well, let me like spill out who you are. And then like there's the 5 love languages as well, which we profile people on as well. And I'm like, these are going to be your top 2 love languages. This is how you function in the world. And he's like how do you know this? And it's just like, because obviously we just studied every day. So it just helps you love on your clients better. It helps you love on your team better. And then of course it helps them make more sales. So
Yeah. Yep. Love it, dude. So something like, like the disc, and it sounds like that's, you've got the other 2 that you rely on as well and you utilize very heavily. But most people have heard of the disc, right? And it's free. I just go out there and take, Tony Robbins free disc or whatever to take it. One thing that I've found difficult there, because it was never trademarked or patented, there's not one way to teach the disc, from these other trainers out there. And it can get very confusing when you're looking out there to figure out, well, how do I get the training or get the knowledge? What are some recommendations that you'd give to our listeners to be able to get really good at it? That's helped you with it.
For me, I mean, I listened to a lot of people, which gave me some base. I think the biggest thing for me was looking at like 100 to 200 different people and then meeting them in real life.
Yeah.
And I don't know how people would do that, maybe other than maybe they should go on their Facebook, and say, hey friends, like, I just want to know more about you. Will you take this test? And then let's sit down and have a cup of coffee and talk about it. Maybe that's a great way to connect your sphere. But for me, it was like in the hiring process. And so I think just seeing, okay, this is what this guy's disc is. This is how he presents himself. And then what I would do, and every time someone would come in to take a look at, joining us, I would say, okay, I would print it out. I'd give them a copy, and then I'd have a copy. And I'd say, this is what this personality test tells me you're like. Is this accurate? And like 95% of the time, they're like, you just described who I am. And so I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'm like, okay, so from that, what of these things do I want in my organization? And what do I not want in my organization? And so that's been really helpful too, is like, okay, once you start to identify this disc matches this person, then you could say, well, I want this type of person and not that type of person. And then it can get clear. So, I mean, my journey was just through hard, like, evaluation. I mean, I'd be happy to help anybody who wants to learn more. I mean, if we wanted to put together like a webinar or something, and I have very specific, like, thoughts on what should be an ISA and whatnot. Most of like my buyer agent, listing agent things are fairly similar to what you would hear out there, but like my ISA, I know is a bit different. So.
Yep. Yeah. No, I'll take you up on that, man. It would be epic. I mean, I know I learned a shit ton from it and a lot of others. So we'll have to do that. So, all right, dude. So, I mean, you're wearing a lot of hats, right? Because you're running the business, right? Plus you're still having, some of those, conversations, if you will, to get the listing appointment, whatever, plus you're role playing with your agents daily, your ISAs daily, right? Having to inspect what you expect, hire new people. I mean, you're wearing a lot of hats. How do you keep all of that together? I mean, is it really just boil down to your processes and systems where you can see what's going on at any given time? And like, what do you think a lot of the key of your success has been there to wear all these hats so successfully?
Well, part of it's lack of sleep, which I learned from you. I mean, if you work more hours in a day, it gets a little easier. But I think a lot of it, I mean, there's parts of the business that I don't have to do anymore. We've got a full-time marketing guy, so obviously he shoots all of our videos and our listings and those sorts of things. But he also handles a lot of other things, like creating systems for us. He's really analytical. Our TC. He handles, our files, but he's still got 10, 20 hours a week at least, that he could invest in creating process for us. So there's a lot of handoffs that I can do. And the other thing is just having routine, just coming in and like, okay, from 7 to 7:30, I review so I have a very regimented process for how I check the business numbers and which ones I check and how I go through my morning. And then at 7:30 to 8, pretty much on the dot, we do our morning role play. Then I go into some other business stuff. And so it's just creating that, time blocking has been crucial.
Yep. No, I love it, man. Yeah, it's, man, I mean, that daily plan, daily reflection, that time blocking, which a lot of people, especially real estate, have a tough time with, because I think so many get into this business because they want the freedom, right? But it's that time blocking that gives you the freedom, right?
Right.
So
yeah,
it becomes so huge.
And I will tell you, time blocking as an agent was probably 100 times easier than time blocking as a team leader. Like as an agent, my mindset for me was pretty simple. I'm either setting an appointment or I'm on an appointment, or maybe I'm dealing with a client, and that's it. Like that's what my world should be. But as you become a team leader, you've got these fires and you've got all these other things, and you're like, I mean, it just can eat your day. I grossly underestimate how hard it would be to manage my time becoming a team leader compared to being an agent.
Yep. Love it, dude. So then, I know your market is shifting very quickly, right? And you're one of these guys that built a very successful team on when the market was on fire, and now it's doing the opposite, and you're continuing to create success, but you had to make some shifts, like we talked about your conduction ratio and some of these things that got thrown off, and you guys had to readapt. And the reason I'm asking this question is, there's a lot of agents that are going through the same shift that you're going through. And if agents aren't, they're going too soon. And who knows how ugly, who knows what it will do. All we know is that market shift, right? So, what are some of the things that you guys are doing to be able to adapt, pay attention, to be able to shift and adapt, and advice that you'd have for others to prepare for what is coming?
Yeah. So the majority of our business when I first got started was off of expireds and open houses. And so, the fortunate and unfortunate part is, the fortunate part is we built our business off of prospecting one way or another. So that's been nice. So the prospecting, we haven't noticed crazy too much slowdown in that endeavor, maybe a little bit, but prospecting seems to, on the expired level, it might even be getting better for us. We went from 25 leads a day in our 2-hour market span to like 40 or 50. So we actually have more leads to call right now. They're a little more reluctant to do business, but we have twice the leads. So I think in that regard, we're doing okay. What we didn't do from the very beginning is I never really had a good plan in place to convert my sphere into transactions. I was so worried about like hitting up my sphere and damaging those relationships that I didn't do it. And now we're really starting to get heavy into it. We've got a 60 touch marketing calendar, and we're now figuring out the best ways to incorporate our agents into creating their own sub 60 touch marketing calendars, where our marketing guys helping each person shoot a couple videos a month, plus a few other things to get out there to their client or their sphere. So I think that's going to be the big game long term for us, is the sphere. But for right now, we have added the Facebook lead ads. So we have about 1,000 leads coming in a month, and we have our agents and our ISA churning through those and creating some deals for us. But we're still, we're only maybe 9 months into generating those leads. So we're still kind of paying the price of letting those leads curate a little bit before, and we have closings off of them, but I'm excited for when we have, a full 2-3% conversion rate, maybe even up to 5% conversion rate off of them.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Love it, dude. So then, all right. So then it sounds like today, I don't know if you guys are still doing open houses, but you're still pounding expires hard. You got Facebook lead ads coming in hard. Hitting your sphere of influence. Is there anything else that you guys are doing that you're seeing that's working right now?
We're doing open houses. It's just not the same. The traffic's way down. Even like same type of house, same place, the traffic might be a half, maybe even 30 to 40% of what it once was. So we're still doing them because it still generates deals, but it's just not the same. So I don't know that I'll ever stop doing them. Maybe if it got a little bit, quite a bit worse, maybe, but there's still business there. So yeah. So we're really, over the next 6 to 9 months, we're really going to focus on becoming absolute masters over, the Facebook lead generation and those pillars, and over sphere marketing. And then after that, we'll probably start taking a look at some other thing like radio or, something along those lines, or maybe direct mail. I mean, I've tried direct mail in sprints. Expired direct mail is kind of the only thing I've had success with in terms of direct mail. So.
Yeah. Yeah, the cool thing is when you got service stuff like Remine with direct mail, I think that's going to change the game for direct mail, dude, because now we can get so much more targeted. Like, for example, like I used to do 50, just over 50,000 pieces a month, but like somebody maybe just bought this house, right? Well, they get at it, right? Well, like a better way of maybe doing that is if the average person is selling every 5 to 7 years in that subdivision, maybe I add them year 3, right? Or like in my area, I don't know how your area is, but we have a ton of institutional buyers out here. Your Blackstones and whatever. So I can eliminate institutional buyers, for example, that might eliminate 20% of that wasted direct mail piece, right? So the tools that we have there allow us to get so much more targeted. So, I've been thinking very heavily too about bringing back direct mail because now we can get so much more laser focused.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, you said something just a moment ago that I want to elaborate on because I think it's critical because I see so many agents that are like, they stay in this little small pocket, this small radius, right? They think, well, just my city, that might only be 10,000 rooftops. And they don't think of going to the city next to them 45 minutes away, but, might add another, 200,000 people to their pipe. And you said you got a 2-hour kind of radius of a commute time of a area that you guys cover. What would you give advice for on the importance of people willing to cover a bigger area? And even that means, man, you might have to drive an hour for an appointment. Yeah, right. But it just opens up so many more opportunities.
We've loved it. I mean, and ours just came organically from the fact that I felt like expireds was one of the best lead sources to pursue. The leads, there was an easy system, Vulcan, that we could pay for that had the cell phone numbers on my computer ready to go in the morning. And so for me, it's like I've got my leads there. I don't have to think about it. I just call them every single day. I drive an hour to the appointment. I'm listening to my self-development. I go list the property. I come back, So for me, driving was way better than showing buyers. So my open houses were in my town so that my buyers were local. But, so, and then as we expanded, I just brought on an agent that was an hour and 15 minutes north of us. And so, now getting out to Sacramento, which is an hour and a half north of us, is no problem. We could sell in Sacramento easily. So we're bringing on an agent that's going to be in Fresno, which will expand us so that literally we'll have a 3 to 4 hour radius. So we like to get more deep on the pillar of the lead source, and I don't care as much about geography, whereas some people care more about geography than less about lead source. So I just like getting really good conversationally and marketing wise on a particular stream.
Yep, love it, dude. And then the cool thing with technology now is, a lot of people I think have resistance to that as far as, well, I need to get the agents in the office. Yeah, right. But with the virtual component, like you can have Zoom conference rooms, you can role play virtually. It doesn't have to break any element of training or the culture because of all the virtual tools we have, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the office becomes, and similarly for the clients you're taking on. I mean, the number of houses that I've sold I've never met the people. I mean, it's growing. I mean, it was high then and it's growing now. Like, and I think a lot of times people prefer not to meet you. I mean, quite frankly, if what we've been training, some of our agents to do and our ISAs to do is, hey, offer them a quick Zoom meeting. Because there's expireds where they're going to meet with somebody 2 hours from now, and chances are they're going to list with that person if that person's good. So if our appointment's an hour or two later, we're not getting it. So if there's no way that we could physically get to the appointment before another agent, we'll just say, hey, do you have 15 minutes right now? I could send you a link and let's just do the appointment right now.
Yep.
And so there's been times where sorry, Mr. Other Agent, we listed that sucker right then and there, right on the call. And, hey, yeah, we'll call him for you. Tell him it's listed. He doesn't even know to come out.
Yeah. No, I love that. Problem. Well, and those that are watching this, at least if you're watching this, not listening on iTunes, that's the software that we're using for this is Zoom. So it's split screen, which is the next best thing to being face-to-face. But I just got to click a button right down here, pull up a share screen, could do my listing presentation. And where I'm at, we've had to do a lot of these just because we're such a big melting pot. There's, we have a lot of snowbirds that only live out here for a certain amount of the year. Or we have even on the buyer consult side, we'll have somebody that's, hey man, I live in Michigan or live in Indiana, we're relocating out there. But before I block off 3 days on my calendar to go show them, Like, we got to lock them down as a client first. And yeah, these Zoom meetings become huge, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yep. Love it, man. Love it, dude. So, as you expand, right, with the knowledge base that you've had. I mean, you kind of talked about some of the things that you expand to with recruiting more agents and with knowing what you know now. Like, where do you see all this going here? Like, where do you see the team, like the next 3 years is for your vision for the expansion of it?
I mean, I see our team growing immensely. I see there kind of being a core team that also, forms the leadership body of where we're heading. And then I see a much broader group of people that love what we're doing and want to kind of tap into it a little bit, but they don't need all the services, handled for them. So, I mean, I see us growing, 2019, I say maybe we add 20 agents or so. I'd like to see us, in a few years at, maybe 100 to 200 agents, that are each producing at least 12 deals a year. And then maybe the ones that are more in the core team are producing at 30 to 150 deals a year.
Yep. Yeah. Do you ever see yourself, like with your model expanding out of California and doing, you're seeing more and more expansion teams, starting to hop other states?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'd want to probably cover California pretty well first before I have to go get other states' licenses. Yeah, I mean, similarly, like I feel like I like the idea of getting good at something, and I'm not really as worried about the geography of the thing. So like I coached an agent out in Illinois and on how to grow her expired business out. I mean, we got her profitable fast. I mean, doing tons of deals. And I've coached other agents where it was much more difficult. Maybe because it was them, maybe their skill set. But I think certain areas are a little more ripe on certain lead sources than others. And so I think, if we were to expand, I would probably be very diligent thinking, what do we do insanely well? And what markets are really receptive to that thing, and expanding there.
Yep. No, I love that, dude. So then, I know one thing that you do really well, right, is and something I always harp on, but you do a much better job than even I do at it. But is developing those back end systems and processes and really knowing your numbers, dude, right? Like, and I don't want to say it's because of your back math profession, but that may not hurt where you do like making data driven decisions. But talk about the importance of that. Because again, it was one of these mistakes that I didn't really like. It took me getting so burnt out where I was ready to quit the business before I really started paying attention. And if I would have paid attention to tracking the numbers and knowing the numbers and making true, smart, strategic decisions, like my business would look so much different than it does today. Right? So can you kind of hit on the importance of that and what that has meant for your overall success?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is like if you don't know your numbers, it's like playing in the NFL blindfolded. Sure, I mean, maybe you can get lucky and run the right route or catch the right pass, but I mean, playing with your numbers, it's a lot clearer. It doesn't make the decisions any easier. Like, I mean, there's been times where I know that I should make cuts, and sometimes that might involve people, and I hate that. And I'm not even good at it. Like there's times where I'm like, fine, I'll take a little bit more of a loss or I'll sacrifice on profit because I don't want to have to make this decision, but at least I know. So I think that's the big thing is like I coach businesses that are outside of our industry. And there was a guy that lost like $150,000 because he kept an employee on. He didn't even know he was losing the money. And like that to me, that's heartbreaking, that he has to go home and I don't know if he's going to tell his wife or not, but like the conversations that he has and the opportunities his kids won't have because he didn't know, and there's like, as we've grown, the hardest year in our business for me has been this last year where we've gotten the office and we put all the things in place, because you kind of have to jump ahead to have things ready. And so like, it's hard, like knowing the numbers and knowing like, man, like in a day I could just wipe some stuff and be making an additional 150 to 250,000 a year that could go straight to our, debt retirement and, investing. And then like that part, like it's good because, but sometimes it's challenging because you're like, is this worth it?
Right.
Like is what we're building worth it? So.
Yeah. No, I mean, it gives it, I mean, by no means does just because you know your numbers and I mean, by no means does that mean that we're still not going to get things wrong and it's all
Yep.
going to be easy.
Yeah.
Right. But it is massively going to minimize mistakes and
Big time.
allow you to make those decisions. So I love it, dude. So I don't know if this is something you're able to talk about, but if not, I can edit and remove
Yeah.
this comment. But but about your dialer, dude. Right? I mean, you've been creating this software, which is something, man, I'm excited about. I don't
Yeah.
know, what the plans look like for potential release to us all in the real estate business, but the software that you're building, that you're using in your team and killing it with, I mean, it's epic. Is that something you can elaborate on?
Um, Possibly. I'll let you make the decision. It started off as a dialer that complemented the fact that we were on Infusionsoft, because Infusionsoft didn't have a dialer and didn't have really a sales reporting aspect. And I know there's some people that have really tried to build out that aspect, but for us, it didn't work, or it just was too hard. So we've actually built out the full aspect. So we use it as everything for our team. We use it as our CRM. We use it as websites. We use it as like our follow-up process and our statistical tracking, and we use it for the full nine. So yeah, it's been great. Like it's the biggest thing for us has been the interconnectivity of the pieces. So for example, like the queries that you can have in the CRM and what you can know about the prospects that are happening, and then they're automatically in the dialing system. It's not like a triple line or a 5-line like some of these other ones. It's a single line, but the fluidness of, like, I can have a conversation with somebody right now and literally press one button and all of the automation happens from around that, like the campaigns, the text messages, the communication to the staffing. I mean, all of that's just automatic through the system. So it's been great. Like we're pretty confident. Like, I mean, we've been using it now for like 10 months. So it's just having, I think for me, having the guts to say other people hop on it. And of course there's bugs, like watching YouTube go down was great for me.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, like I think you mentioned that on stage too. It's like, I'm just terrified that people are going to be like, this sucks. Like I know our team loves it, but I think that's the big thing too. Plus, like there's so many other business things that go into it. Like we have to run tech support, and like, I mean, like who's going to do that? Is one of our team members going to do that? Are we going to hire somebody? Like, and then that becomes a whole other conversation of like, who do we hire and what is the job description? And so that's why I have so much admiration for you in terms of running these different businesses is, what it takes to really get a business off the ground right. So yeah, I mean, maybe we'll have to edit it. I don't know. But I know we're probably going to try and get like 20 to 30 people on to beta it for a couple months and see how that goes and get feedback. And if that goes well, then, probably try and make a scale launch. One idea I have is just to take, if my broker will allow it, we have about 350 agents in the brokerage, say, hey, can I put the 350 agents in the brokerage on this thing and let them rip it to shreds? And then if they don't, then say, okay, it's time.
Yep. No, I love it, dude. No, it sounds epic, man. And it's, that's one of the hard things out there is finding that one system that, especially the tracking component, man, it becomes so difficult. And even if your systems can integrate with like a Mojo, there's always multiple steps that create bottlenecks and all the like really good dialers that have been built weren't built for real estate specific businesses.
Correct.
Right? Where that's what this is built for. So, I love it. I'm excited for it, dude. So, a question I always ask on the podcast is, knowing everything that you know now, if you were to go back, like if Matt today was able to go back, 3 years or so ago when you were starting this journey and knowing everything that you know now, if you could give yourself, one or maybe two pieces of advice that you feel would have just fast forward your trajectory to success, knowing what you know now, what would those two pieces of advice look like?
I would have probably kept my head down a little bit longer before making my first hire. I would have somehow figured out a way to learn, get a coach, whatever it took, before I made my first hire to make sure that was going to be my rock star. I would have done that for sure. And then I would have probably waited just a hair longer on each of the phases of development. Like, for example, we got our office, which cost us all, like between the rent and the utilities we take on, the printer, et cetera, it's about $4,000 a month. So I would have probably waited another 6 months to a year before taking that on. Right. So like what we did is we had that mindset of, okay, I had my revenue in 15, I doubled in 16, I doubled in 17. Surely I'm going to double in 18. That's only logical. And then we didn't. Like, we're basically going to limp into what we did last year, right? It's our first year where we were, because we had to cut some people and we had to rework some stuff. And so when you double your expenses and your revenue doesn't double, like, you're like, man, I didn't make that much money, And so I would say, to have a little bit less of a stressful process, I would have probably built just a hair slower, waited a little longer on some of the expenses, and I think it would have been a little bit more of an enjoyable ride.
Do you think that some of it comes from, because one hard lesson for, I think, all of us that are driven to learn is the power of patience. Yeah, right? You think it was from not being, being patient enough, or do you think it was literally, from a lack of planning, like you felt like it was truly that time to pull the trigger, and you just got surprised that it wasn't?
I think what you just said. And so, like, I consult with my dad a ton because he's a really intelligent mind and he's far more conservative than I am. And so I was talking to him through the office decision. He's like, Matt, I think you're 6 months to maybe a year and a half early. And I'm like, okay. So I took it in. I was, but like, I was thinking constantly about the problems that we had with our existing office. It wasn't big enough. We had to share it with the home smart agents. There was a culture mismatch. There was this and that. So I was continually justifying to myself why this was a necessary thing. Looking back, it's like, could we have survived there for 6 months to a year? Yes, we could have. Yeah. And just tested, hey, before we jump and double our expenses again, like, are we going to grow again to where we're grossly over revenue compared to our expenses? And so, yeah, I find myself being far more on the aggressive side. I mean, obviously we're taking a lot of our real estate profits in order to do things like build the software and other things. So, like, there's a lot of siphoning that we do where it's like, I could easily be on the opposite side. Now, I don't want to be on the opposite side. I don't want to be conservative because I think the industry's changing too fast to be conservative. But man, like, I probably had a few sleepless nights more than I needed.
Yeah. Love it, dude. Well, we all do. It's all part of the process, right? It's one of these things where it's so easy to figure out what to do. It's almost impossible to figure out what not to do.
That's right.
You go through some of these life lessons, man.
Yeah. So, and hopefully a few of the listeners can relate, to, just different phases of the business create just such different levels of enjoy and frustration.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what's so epic about it. The challenge, like, we can never get bored. There's not a time when we'll never be able to not get better, right? And it becomes the love-hate of the business, but it's the amazing part of it, man.
It is indeed. I wouldn't trade it. I mean, I wouldn't go back to my job. I mean, you could have my job pay me what I'm making now. I would never go back.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it, dude. So, Matt, I know that you guys, you're expanding your team. You guys are got a lot going on there with that. So if any of our listeners are maybe in your area or just have some interest there, or it also sounds like you're doing some coaching. So if anybody's like, hey, man, I'd love to talk with Matt about maybe just learning more, where's the best place to reach you at, Matt, so they can do that?
Yeah, I mean, we could toss my contact information, email and phone number. Reach me on Facebook is actually really good as well. I check my Facebook pretty regularly. So I think the biggest ways, we've got a really nice office. If people want to just come and spend a half a day or day with us, we could talk about that. Or, if people want to hop on these role plays with us, I know our team gets a lot from some of the people that aren't in our team hopping on. And if people want one-on-one coaching, we could talk about that as well. But obviously we're super open to anything that can help people out.
Cool. So yeah, we'll have just right below this video, we'll have all your contact information, number, email, all of that. So if you're out listening on iTunes and you're not watching this, you can go to gsdmode.com and see this, or go to check us out on YouTube and make sure that you can see his contact information. So those watching this, I know I end every podcast with this, you guys, but information without implementation truly is the start of delusion. Information is the power. It's taking that information, taking massive action on that creates the power. So then that you can go create the life that you want and deserve. And Matt shared so many amazing pieces of advice with you guys today. Don't just listen to it. Take action on something that take something that you learned, go take action on it. So again, you can create the life that you want and deserve. And Matt, man, I truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to be here, man. It's always an honor rolling with you, man. So I truly, truly appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, man.
100%. All right, you guys, we will see you next time. Peace.